Hello?
Hello, hello.
Hi, can you hear me clearly?
I can hear you clearly. Chat, can you hear him clearly? They'll answer in a second. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty decent. I'm doing okay. I'm doing A-okay.
Wonderful. Happy to have you here. Hope I can have you on more in the future. I apologize for taking a while to get back to you. I do want to learn more about international issues. Belarus has interested me in large part because people told me that shit is fucked. Speaking,
Mhm.
sort of in the non-commentaire of the foreign policy advisor. I was interested in talking about this with you because you are a big brain fellow. So thank you for coming on.
No problem, no problem. I'm happy to come on, and you can tell Kanye that the CIA will see to that follower number quickly.
There you go, Kanye. Now, here's a question for you, okay? Given the severity of the issues that we're about to discuss, do you think it would be inappropriate for me to be playing some sweet-ass Fall Guys on screen? Or do you think it would actually be a welcome accompaniment to the otherwise doomy and gloomy nature of the upheaval going on in that part of the world?
Well, well, considering they're both what's going on in Belarus, there has been torture going on there. I don't know if you also playing footage of torture while playing Fall Guys would be appropriate.
Gotcha. I see. I see. So we're getting a video accompaniment as well?
Well, I can send you some interesting videos to say the least.
Okay. Yeah. You know what? With YouTube TOS in mind, you stream on Twitch, right? So you deal with even
Yes.
yeah, you deal
Yes.
with even stricter TOS. So I
I
I,
stream
tr-
on
I
Twitch.
trust you.
And you don't stream on Twitch, which means there's a lot of people here with Twitch Primes that they haven't used up for certain creators.
All right. Yeah. How about you sell them on that after you've shown us where your chops lie? I'm 3 times the size I was last time we talked. Uh. Uh.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So hit me up. Give me the initial prompt. Treat me like an idiot school child, and I'll try to
Okay.
chime in when I can.
Okay. So I know it might be hard to believe, but there are actually countries outside of the United States, and one of those countries is a nation by the name of Belarus, which is between an extremely strategically important place between Russia and the European Union, and it is led by a man by the name of Alexander Lukashenko, who has led the country since 1994, which is also conveniently the last election which had any legitimacy attached to it.
Ah.
Uh, af-
I was
After
I was
that,
born then. I wonder if there's any significance to that.
you brought the dictatorship to Belarus single-handedly by your birth.
Oh,
Yeah, good job. This is your fault.
I feel like kind of an asshole now, but yeah, okay. So,
Yep.
sorry.
Yeah. Well, you should tell that to the people of Belarus. But after that, he basically did some certain referendums in 1995, which made it so he could kind of dissolve the parliament quite easily if he believed they were doing something unconstitutional. He did stuff against the parliament's wishes, and in 1996, he did a huge power grab, which after that point, it's hard to call Belarus a democracy.
Mhm.
There's been basically allegations of vote stuffing, which I can actually have video evidence of if you'd like to see it.
Sure.
There's I'll send it yeah, I'll send it to you in DMs. There's been allegations of yeah, for the just the usual how you like change the vote in a country. He somehow always seems like get around 80% of the vote no matter the election,
Mhm.
and it has gotten to hilariously dictatorial levels. The last legislative election before this recent election that happened was in 2019, and not a single opposition candidate won election. All
Hmm.
110 seats went to pro-government legislators, which just shows how much people love Alexander Lukashenko.
Ah, interesting. Yeah, the classic 101% of the vote tactic.
Yeah, yeah. Except he always seems to get exactly 80% of the vote or around that number. It's quite bizarre. But yeah, he in 2019 there was parliamentary elections and not a single opposition candidate won. And there's only been one term since 2004 where opposition candidates even held a seat, had a MP in the House.
Mhm.
So you can see how this is hilariously, just very obviously. A dictatorship. I'll send you the evidence. This is actually from 2019. This is a video that's been shared around a lot that shows vote stuffing
Mhm.
that happened during the 2019 election. Now, this person questions, they're speaking in Russian, so you can't really like understand what they're saying. But basically, he goes to this woman who holds a ton of ballots and he's like, "What are you doing with that? What are you doing with that?" She doesn't answer. She turns away and walks away after stepping out of a voting booth. And
Says no and walks away.
yeah, yeah, when somebody questions whether you're committing like a horrific crime against democracy, you just turn around and walk away, as we all do, right? Just pretend it isn't happening. Um, and this person who questioned it, the head of the CEC, which is the Central Election Commission of Belarus, actually called for this observer to have their accreditation removed, who, by the way, was banned from Europe in 2006 due
Mhm.
to helping. Conveniently, was banned from Europe in 2006 because they were said to have participated in election fraud. Um, this person then had their accreditation removed shortly after for being truthful about what was happening in Belarus.
Right. Now, I understand, of course, that um, proving allegations of vote stuffing and of election fraud, this is actually quite a complicated thing. So
Yes.
when you say that he's a cheater, I assume this is well corroborated and generally agreed upon. This isn't like some shaky report by some
This
American advisor who has like a geopolitical interest contrary to that of Borisenko. This is a
no,
fairly
no.
well-known.
This is something you could basically find. The only people I know who could possibly say it wasn't. For instance, do you know who Ben Norton is by chance?
Did I say Borisenko? What's the actual name of
Uh,
the president?
you mean Alexander Lukashenko? Wait,
Lukashenko.
Did you say
Yeah, I
Borisenko?
said Borisenko. Lukashenko, Borisenko.
That's
Yeah,
the
there we
Boris
go.
Lukashenko coalition is going to be strong.
Yeah, why
Fuck.
not, right? Maybe he had a really fun rally one time, you know?
Oh,
Yeah.
well, Lukashenko's also famously homophobic, and I recently said that NATO would put black-skinned troops inside of Belarus. So him and Boris have a lot in common,
Okay,
actually.
yeah, you're selling it pretty you're selling it pretty hard. Okay, so this is a very well agreed upon
Yes.
corrupt dictator. The allegations of vote rigging are well substantiated, and
Yeah.
is this now? I have to ask you because I get into arguments with lefties from time to time, and when I do, I often find myself arguing with somebody who claims to stand for human rights, but argues that the multilateral support of the population in favor of a single party to the absolute exclusion of all other political ideologies is totally okay as long as you're opposing American interests. I know, of course, that Belarus is generally aligned with Russia, Russia not so much with the United States of America.
It's complicated.
I assume, is this a country that tankies would defend generally?
It depends because Lukashenko's very big about preserving the Soviet legacy.
Hmm.
Extremely large on this. If you look at the iconography, in the 2015, no, the 1995 referendum I was talking about earlier, there was also ballot, which the legislature said they couldn't do, but he did it anyway.
Hmm.
Basically, he put something on it saying like, "Do you want to change the flag of Belarus to this?" And another thing was changing the coat of arms, and it changed it from a person on a horse, this very on the back of a horse, like this old Belarusian coat of arms, to this basically red star outline of very, very Soviet iconography. There's still Soviet statues everywhere. He very much kind of avoided the shock therapy that many post-Soviet states went
I
through.
see. So they maintained all of the USSR aesthetics moving into
Yeah,
an autocratic capitalist government.
and he specifically chose a very dumb flag replacement, which everybody really doesn't kind of like. I like the old Belarusian flag, the white, red, and white. I think it looks cool. I
Mhm.
think the new Belarus flag is really not nearly as cool as
Is
the
that the
old
one
one.
with a Persian rug on the left side?
Basically, yes. I forget the exact call of it, but it's some stitching thing they do in Belarus. I forget exactly what it is.
I think it looks pretty.
It
Looks like
has
a bitch to
literally no
draw
representation.
quickly.
The thing on the left has literally no like symbolic representation. It's just a cultural thing.
Oh, okay. So it's just like a pretty design.
The bottom green represents prosperity. The top red thing represents like I think liberty.
Ah, okay. Gotcha. Gotcha.
Yeah.
They should have put the little cash S in there. You know what I'm talking about? Did you doodle those
Oh.
in? Oh God, you're
Oh
probably too
yeah.
young for that, aren't you?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not in my late 70s like you know.
Oh, you're 19, right?
Yes, I am 19 years of age.
Okay,
The
well, I
correct the
remember
correct
doing
age,
that in
by the
middle
way.
school, and you're
Uh-huh.
7 years younger than me. So in middle school, I would have been between 9 and 12. So you would
You
have
know,
been, yeah, you would have been, yeah. I don't know, maybe if you know, you
Bobby.
know. Okay,
Yeah,
middle schoolers still do that.
yeah.
Okay,
You're a boomer. I understand.
okay. Moving on. Belarus, not a democracy, adopts Soviet aesthetics to ease the
Yeah.
transition from the Soviet bloc to a more modern autocratic society. Modern, maybe being sort of a stretch. Where are we finding ourselves now?
So what we're finding ourselves now is that there's always been like some amount of protests, like student protests and stuff during these. There's actually an amazing documentary that's now free on YouTube. It was recently made free on YouTube that talks about the crackdown after the 2010 election and the fraud that took place and the brutal beating of protesters. And Lukashenko's is a very strongman character. And let me tell you like how bro man dictator he is. He'll literally go to other world leaders and reporters and just brag about being a dictator. I
Mhm.
forget the quote, but he's like, "Hey, how's it feel? You're standing with the last dictator of Europe," something along those lines,
Classic.
right? Like it's very like just being very evident about who he is. He knows what he is, but of course, then when it comes to no, it's all a joke, guys. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. He oh, and let me tell you about some things that I think have compounded the situation because it's if it was just another version of election fraud, then it's why did this one stand out? Is
Mhm.
because recently he's been not doing great because he's been managing the economy badly and he has been the worst possible person on COVID. He's worse than Trump on COVID, and I mean that 100%.
Wow,
Um,
authoritarians who act as strongmen for their countries don't do a good job addressing a pandemic. Really?
well, basically, can I read you the direct quote of what he said in a hockey rink while he was playing hockey during the pandemic?
Please.
Um, let's see if I can find it. Okay, so basically, Belarus is the one country in Europe basically has no restrictions now, zero. Um, and this is the response he gave when a reporter asked him about it. There are no viruses here. Have you noticed any viruses in the air? He then goes on to suggest hockey could protect him from COVID due to how cold it was. He also said at a different occasion that saunas, vodka, and hard work are also cures.
Hmm. Yeah, it sounds like an amalgamation of every bad take I've ever heard from like a boomer. You know.
Yeah.
I've talked about this before, but one of the reasons I think why COVID-19 has proved such a difficult project for strongmen around the world is because dealing with a pandemic involves sort of recognizing the overwhelming power of nature and taking conciliatory measures to scale back your strength and your control over society in an effort to wear it out. And that's completely antithetical to the interests of a strongman. You know, to them, they can never take like a break. They can never say we need to be calm. We need to be patient. They can never say these things. They have to keep their population in a constant fervor of projected masculinity. So I imagine, at least from what you just said, that seems to be the case with this guy as well.
He plays a lot of hockey. He recently during the protests, one of his responses to it was carrying an AK-47 with him in his hand. It's purposefully so reporters would see it as kind of like a and I read it as a threat personally. I don't think he's just carrying it for fun. And I think it's a threat directly at a certain, protesters like, "Hey,
We've taken measures against COVID. I've doubled my security.
Go back.
Um,
We shoot at the air. We shoot at the COVID. But he also like went in like a helicopter and like went over the city. Like I don't see no protesters down there. Guess they're scared. And he's just in the part of the city where there isn't, protesters. He's very like macho man kind of dictator. He's
man,
always kind of been like that.
that sounds like a take like straight out of like a conservative YouTube today. You know what I mean? You could
Yeah.
see that like from Tim Pool or something like that. You know what I mean?
I would say that he definitely is. I feel like if he was a YouTuber, he'd be ranting about soy at the moment.
Oh God, yeah, absolutely. Oh, we're gonna be hearing about soy for decades. It's actually a wonder that none of these dipshits have like banned soy from their countries yet. It's some sort of
Well,
performative gesture against the feminization of men.
actually, that's an interesting story when it comes to dairy products in
Oh no.
Belarus, and this actually gets into some geopolitics about Belarus and why this is so a complicated issue, and why you're not going to, why from maybe from Mike Pompeo and others, you might actually not see a lot of direct support for protesters or any sanctions placed on Lukashenko himself. Um,
Okay,
L-
interesting.
L-
Continue.
Lukashenko might be dumb when it comes to biology, um, math, basically everything, but he's really smart when it comes to one thing, and that's geopolitics. In fact, I'd say he has maneuvered himself into being a modern less well I wouldn't even it's kind of almost insulting to Tito to say this, but he's maneuvered himself into a Tito like position between the West and Russia. While the Belarusian economy is extremely reliant on Russian imports and exports, they get around 50% of their imports from Russia, and they export 50% of their products to Russia. They also want to make sure not to be too reliant on Russia. Lukashenko is extremely concentrated on keeping his own power, and they do not want to become another Odessa, another Crimea. They
Mhm.
don't want to be slowly annexed by Putin and Russia. There was even a time there was talks at one point about this union that would kind of be like where they would have a similar currency and all these things. And Lukashenko even once in his own head thought maybe he could be the head of the union, meaning he could actually control Russia because this is how much like ambitious this guy was geopolitically.
Mhm.
Eventually, he saw that was an unattainable goal. Is now trying to position his way to distance himself to a certain extent from Putin to not be too under his control. And so what he does is he plays the two powers against each other. And one example would be in what we call the Milk War. Are you familiar with the Milk War?
No, I'm absolutely not familiar with the Milk War, and even if I was, I'd want you to explain it anyway.
Okay, so the Milk War was not an actual war; it was a trade war. Happened because I think it was, yeah, it was 2009. Basically, Russia wanted Belarus to recognize its holdings in Georgia of southern Ossetia. I never pronounce it correctly.
Mhm.
Ossetia, I believe it is, and it's basically occupation of the area, and they wanted Belarus to recognize it as its own little proxy state. It's a conflict they don't know a lot about,
Mhm.
but anyway, let's just say that Belarus did not fall in line with Russia's demands, and so Belarus has a lot of milk and it likes to export it to Russia. So what Russia did in response to make them cave is said, okay, we're going to block your imports. And so what Lukashenko did is he just went to the Europeans and started exporting milk to Europe. And so, of course, Russia, seeing this, getting concerned about them getting too close to the Europeans, relented, got rid of the sanctions, and then soon after, Lukashenko continued exporting milk to Russia. And he kind of does this back and forth between the Europeans and the Russians constantly to maneuver them off each other so he never gets too close to the other. The Europeans will sometimes get active about human rights or elections or something of that sort, and
Mhm.
he'll go closer to the Russians and make sure that they are there to protect and say, yo, this is a totally legitimate election, like what is happening right now. But when Russia tries to make them kind of, hey, maybe we should take another look at that economic union and single currency and all those things we talked about before, then he might move towards the other direction and kind of bounce off the Europeans. Recently, there's been a lot of problems when it comes to this concept where the Russians no longer want to subsidize Belarus with oil, which their economy is extremely reliant on the gas sector and like I forget the exact terms for it, but basically they are the gas sector is extremely important to Belarus and there's been some problems with it, but that's the strategy he's used to kind of stay in power geopolitically so long. And I will say it's definitely a brilliant strategy.
Do you think that the EU has mishandled their engagement with Belarus and with Lukashenko?
I would say that um
I feel like this is such a common story with the weakling democracy addled Westerners getting outfoxed by
I
open autocrats. I don't know how much of that is a narrative and how much of that is genuinely a thing to be concerned over. But it sounds to me like the EU should have never been in a position to believe they could uh, deal with him in good faith. You know?
Well, the thing is, the European Union kind of wants doesn't want Belarus to get close. Secretary Pompeo has actually made proposals now because Russia's dealings with natural gases have not been going well recently, to the point where where Lukashenko actually threatened to just steal Russia's oil.
Mhm.
That because they actually have gas pipelines that go through Belarus to the rest of Europe. Now that's not as big of a threat because Russia has made a separate gas pipeline that goes through the ocean into Germany, so he can find another way to the international markets.
Mhm.
But Secretary Pompeo has also said that you don't need to be relying on a single energy producer, Lukashenko. There's other ones like us. We're energy sufficient now. We're an exporter. We'd love to maybe help you out there. And this thing is, if the European Union was just completely cut off Lukashenko, then what they see is they would push Lukashenko into the arms of Russia and then make him extremely tied only further, and
Mhm.
then kind of lose any hope of possibly making progress in that area. And then Russia's in the position where if he pushed them too hard, then maybe Lukashenko could maybe just make a 180 and go to the Europeans.
This reminds me
So
of Tito.
this
Um,
that's what I told you about.
yeah, yeah,
It's
no,
almost
no, it
like
really
Tito.
does. Yeah, like he's taking the Tito pill, except without
Yeah.
even the veneer of market socialism to maybe serve
Yeah,
as a
just
lesson for future.
vodka and saunas, exactly.
Right. Um, the I don't it would be incredibly presumptuous of me to just hear what you're telling me now and think like, oh well, in that position, I would have simply. um, it's interesting. Um, yeah, I'd have to learn more before I think I could make any sort
This
of prescriptive statements.
I recently the dialogue has kind of changed a little bit. Recently, before this event happened, there's been a lot of talks about Belarus possibly falling out more and more with Russia, to the point where, again, natural gas is of extreme importance to the Belarusian economy.
Mhm.
They have huge like plants which process this material, which is then used to help with the economy. And Russia's um subsidizing of this oil at below market prices was extremely important to kind of help Belarus avoid the economic shock therapy that nations like Moldova and Romania had to go through.
Mhm.
So, Hungary and the rest of them. So, I think with that ending due to increased sanctions on Russia and other economic pressure that Russia has been going under, there's been a rift definitely with him threatening to steal their oil at one point, and of course rejections of certain military bases. But there's again, the ties there are still extensive, but there's been talk that maybe the shift would continue slowly in Europe's favor. And what you've seen from a lot of European leaders is they basically said, you know what, let's drop all this like let's just play some real politique for a second. And they've basically been trying to engage with him more and more, trying to pull him in that direction. But ever since these protests started, it's kind of hard to see where they're going to go with this, because they have refused to place sanctions directly on Lukashenko, suggesting that they still have that end goal in mind, that kind of realpolitik, like, well, let's play the long game. But they've also placed over 30 sanctions on government officials, travel restrictions, and have vocally supported the protest movement. So I think they're kind of hedging their bets here. It's hard to say what exact path they're going to take.
Mhm. Um, okay, so it is a country of substantial geopolitical importance in its own region that has adversarial relationships with both Russia and EU, but both Russia and the EU have reasons to want to deal with them. And Lukashenko has been fairly effectively navigating this spider's web of geopolitical interests in such a way as to maintain his power,
Yes.
and not overly defer to one side, because to do so would end up upsetting that balance and probably
Yes.
end up losing the
Yeah.
benefits of being
Or
associated with the other side.
he's done this for 26 years, even if I would say he still has stronger times to Russia at the end of the day.
Gotcha. Okay. Um, what the fuck is going on right now?
Okay, so this recently was the 2020 election. Uh, Alexander Lukashenko, of course, as always, glorious in his fashion of victory, won with 80% of the vote during a COVID crisis where he said that just drink vodka, Lamau, I don't see no virus in the air. Also, our economy's falling away to the part where, well, it's been kind of going down since 2012. Also, I'm threatening to steal Russia's oil. Also, we're tapping into our natural gas reserves. Yeah, but vote for Mill, 80% of the vote. What a surprise.
Yeah,
And
busy year, crazy.
yeah, it's crazy. He did great. It'd be like if Trump went through all of this. Could you imagine Trump going through everything he has and walking away with 80% of the vote? Could you
I,
imagine?
y-
Like
don't
actually, like it's a comical. 80% of the vote though. Not like he barely went and he wins it and he got 80%, like I'm talking the popular vote right now. 80% of the vote.
I have never had less faith in the American electorate. Please ask me again after November, and I will give you my answer then. I'm deferring it.
But you can see how
I
that
can
might be
see.
yes.
Yeah. Obviously, I mean, I can understand how, given all of that, it's entirely possible. By the way, I feel like sometimes the most the most passionate advocates for human liberty are people who have not yet tasted it. There are people here in America who are willing to sell their freedom to the government if they know that black folk will get fucked over twice as hard for it. But there are
Yep.
a lot of people. I mean, you got students, everyone out there in Hong Kong fighting against what they know is going to happen to them. People in China, people in autocratic regimes all over the world, who I think have sometimes, maybe not for the whole population, but sometimes a much greater appreciation for how bad things can get. And I think under those circumstances, yeah, they'd have a reason to be
Yep.
angry.
Yeah, I would say from looking at my thing is with when it comes to protest movements is there's a lot of kind of it seems to when it comes to political spectrum that everybody's a hypocrite when it comes to like supporting protest movements. I'm a conservative. I've loved the Hong Kong protesters. Oh, but these American BLM rioters, oh, they're ridiculous, right? Or you'll have somebody who's like, well, yeah, I support the BLM protests. They're the best, but those Hong Kong CIA shills need to like get down and kiss the boot.
Yeah,
And it's totally
the real enlightened position is not liking the Hong Kong protests because they're CIA, and also not liking BLM because it's CIA. That's the real above it all take.
yeah. My position has always been to I think I do believe in internationalism when it comes to this extent. I believe we should support the protests in Chile, there's protests in Iraq, the protests in Haiti, there's the protests in Sudan when it came to the blue movement in Sudan. Of course, the protests in Hong Kong, the protests in America. We should support the protests in Belarus. As I don't think an imaginary line on a map dictates someone's humanity, and we need to support them across the board. But it seems that when it comes to these conflicts, when it comes to protests around the world, like these Belarusian protests, it really still you'll always find someone who will shill for the authoritarian regime. In this case, I would say it was Ben Norton from the Gray Zone, who was probably the biggest shill for Lukashenko, who right when the protest started, he just called it another color revolution by the United States.
Nice. Is there any evidence to support the idea that it is just another color revolution by the United States?
I would say it would be difficult to prove it. I have seen no evidence up to this point that there's been any CIA ops or anything like that. I would say the West are more supportive of the protest movement, but that's like the closest you could get to evidence of it. I would say that, and even if there was support for it, like the United States certainly supported the Hong Kong protesters, does that not make the demands of said protesters valid anyway,
Mhm.
even if there was?
Do you think the term color revolution is ever used in good faith anymore? I understand that
No.
historic. Yeah, yeah, okay, yeah. Front me there. I understand that historic. Okay, of course, America still engages in regime change. Of course, I mean we literally just tried and failed to do it. In Venezuela. And
Don't get me started on that operations. It's
right, right,
quite
right, yeah.
interesting.
Right, well, it was a fucking comedy shit show.
Yeah.
Guaido at the club at 4 p.m. on his phone, like you guys said you'd show up. Um, I feel like when people say color revolution, it's almost like a dog whistle, like they're indicating to me that they're just uniformly against any revolution that takes place within a country that isn't allied with the United States.
Um, I mean, when we
I've just
usually when I
had
hear
bad
color revolution, when
experiences.
I hear color revolution, it's usually that anytime that it's a revolution that's against one of America's geopolitical foes, then it's a
Mhm.
color revolution. America's doing it. America's behind everything, and these people are actually just America-backed orbals, and the real people of X country would never and stand beside them. But the thing with Lukashenko is even like all the usual people, the thing about Lukashenko that's really hilarious is the usual people that would come up and say that have mostly just been quiet and haven't been saying much. Even
Mhm.
they know it's comical for even them to say it. When Ben Norton said that, it was met with reactions of just hilarious, just like chortles across the land. Like
Yeah.
even the most MLML would have to just take a step back and be like,
It's
well,
stupid
yeah, Lukashenko's
contrarianism, really.
yeah, it is. So when it comes to the actual protest movement, the protest movement has, of course, after the election, it was rejected by the opposition that this election was free, fair, and that this is the actual results of it.
Mhm.
And so what ended up happening is they started protesting on the streets. They started, getting people out there. But the response they have received has been particularly brutal. Many, of course, have been detained. Some have been killed. Tanks have been placed outside during protests to guard governmental buildings. There have been tons of beatings. There have been alleged torture, and I have heard certain audio, which is extremely horrific. And I can basically tell you that I'm 100% certain that the Lukashenko regime has engaged in torture basically throughout its entire existence. There have been factory walkouts. Leadership has been detained. Of course, Lukashenko has shown strongman attitudes with carrying the gun around and flying over Independence Square in his helicopter. Tear gas has been deployed. But I'd love to show you a particular example of a walkout that happened. So look, well, see if I can find. I have some of the ending audio. I don't have the beginning audio on it because I want. So Lukashenko, there's walkouts at factories happening across the land, and at one particular factory there was a walkout, and some people stayed to work. So what Lukashenko thought is, well, right now I don't have a lot of good press. Okay, what am I gonna do? I got it. Since those people didn't walk out, they probably support me. And so he goes there in his helicopter and makes a speech in front of the factory workers still there, who start chanting, "Leave," in front of all the cameras. And you can see him get like slowly more and more angry because this is somebody who's not used to this type of pressure right in front of him. Again, he's the person who detains you in the middle of the night, throws you away, tortures you, and you disappear forever.
Well, strongmen are very easily flustered. You know,
yeah,
the
extremely.
facade breaks quickly. That's a pretty brave woman. Is she still alive?
Oh no, the whole crowd started chanting that.
Oh, so she didn't start the lead. Okay, gotcha. Are they? How are they doing? Yeah, is there a video of that?
Yeah, I can send you the video. I want to find the close-up video because you can see his face get super snarled. 1 second. Let me see if I can find it.
No worries.
Here it is. Here it is.
Yeah, that's pretty quick.
Okay, let me DM it to you. There it is.
See? Hold on.
И хочет уйти. Никто никого не будет гнобить, никто не будет никого давить. Пожалуйста, с завтрашнего дня или сегодняшнего ворота открыты. Извините за мою непопулярную эту фразу. Но время такое, когда надо говорить честно. Спасибо, я сказал все, можете кричать, уходи.
Верните наши голоса! Уходи! 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 Лукашенко,
For checking out our... We didn't get him curling his face in disgust, but we did get some pretty cool protest footage.
Yeah. So there was an earlier point where he was like, which it didn't show here, but this is the point I really like, where of course you all support the president, and they're just like, no. They just chant no, which was a moment where he kind of just like looked around and like surprised, because he thought since the workers stayed in the factory that they supported them, but they stayed in the factory because it's the worldwide pandemic and they want to keep their jobs, and they also most likely don't want to be thrown away and detained and tortured.
Well, I'm glad that the group of factory workers weren't carpet bombed after. I'm glad that he just sort of resigned himself to walking away shamefully. Now, what percentage of the population would you say still stands by him? Is there like a large MAGA crowd there that is...
There are people who support him, but I have yet to meet any person that's part of like the Belarusian diaspora that like says they're a Lukashenko fan. Most of them fucking despise him.
Well, the diaspora would probably be biased against him, right?
Of course. But I would say maybe like, again, I'm just taking a wild swing here. 25, maybe.
Gotcha. Okay. I mean, that's still a fair number of
30
people.
at most, maybe.
Is he, when it comes to dealing with these protests, do you feel he's attempting to weaponize his supporters against them, or is it more of a just straight autocratic crackdown with military force?
So at first, they basically beat the fuck out of everybody who dared to step out of their home and join the protest. They detained tons of people. This is the period of time where people started, to die. And what they've done, this is a particular tactic which you might be familiar with, where they'd have civilian people, people in civilian clothing, kind of jump out of a van and grab opposition leaders and just throw them in. This actually happened like 10 hours ago.
Mhm.
Another opposition leader was just taken off the street, and when police were asked, they said they have no clue where she is, but
Mhm.
she was taken off very obviously in a black bagging operation.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's a classic tactic right there.
Yes. It has happened a lot. But what's also interesting, I think I do have footage of this, is protesters at this point, maybe they're just getting more and more bold, but they've started fighting back, where people will be getting arrested and a whole swarm of people will just rush the cops and just like throw them off the people and kind of like get them from not being arrested. And this has happened even a few times during black bagging. It's extremely difficult to stop a black bagging because it's so quick,
Mhm.
but people are so like used to it now that they'll see it almost immediately when it starts, and sometimes they'll jump and get involved, beat up the cops, and basically stop them from black bagging someone. I can send you some footage of the protesters rushing police officers
Yeah,
from a
I think
distance.
I remember seeing that. I think on Twitter perhaps. But if you could show that for me, yes, I'd love to show that to stream.
Yes, I sent it to you.
Okay. Here, hold on. Yes, the swarm tactics. Um, how are the protests doing now at this point? Are they still holding strong?
They have not slowed down whatsoever, but I will say there have been things that concern me.
Mhm.
There was also, if you're interested in seeing that clip about him in a ice hockey uniform talking about how the ice hockey will save him from coronavirus, there it is. Uh,
Gotcha.
but there it hasn't slowed down whatsoever. It's continuing to go. If anything, if you don't ask me personally, from the size of the protest, it personally looks like, if anything, they're growing in number with
Mhm.
more walkouts. As they, I guess, like as more time goes by, they're just kind of looking around like, well, most people haven't been detained. But there's still, of course, people who are still disappeared, still being tortured. And a lot of times what they're doing is they're taking people, black bagging them, and throwing them across the border when it comes to leadership specifically, because they see them as people who are like creating disturbances. But the protest movement is still carrying on extremely strong. But there was recently an announcement after Lukashenko's birthday.
Mhm.
What a great present, by the way, all this. Um, where Putin basically said that he has security verses in reserves if need be.
Mhm.
Not suggest. I think we both kind of know what the
Well,
suggestion there is.
yes, I think so. So you think that eventually he's going to he's gonna say fuck it and just do a cleanse?
I don't know. When it comes to like sending in security forces, I think Lukashenko does not want to lose power, but this is where his strategy could be kind of disastrous when it comes to him playing people off each other, because Putin doesn't have the best relationship with him. If this guy was just months ago threatening to take his oil and playing them off against each other, it's kind of hard to go to someone and be like, "Hey, do you want to save me now? I know I just threatened to do all that stuff and this kind of grand politique strategy, but don't you want to do it?" Thankfully for him, it seems that Putin is obliging, because he knows that these protesters aren't exactly probably would not bring in somebody who was exactly adherent to Russian interests exactly in the way you'd want. But I think Putin would be pretty happy just replacing the guy. It's most, from everything I've seen, it's mostly just anti-Lukashenko protests, not like anti-Russian or anti-European or
Yeah,
anti.
what's the goal? What's the goal of this long term? Uh, so like for example, we have our protests here in America. BLM, you get from people saying full on abolish the police to people who just want to implement policies which decrease police brutality. Great, fine, we can sort out that range. But if these are just anti-Lukashenko protests, I feel like there's not much of a framework to ensure that what happens next is better than what is presently there.
This is the problem, is that the opposition has always been, how you say, weak, in a way. I mean, they have specifically, like, Lukashenko has worked hard to make sure that is the case. And it also means that they have, I mean, you got to think, they don't have a single person in the House as an MP currently. They don't have anybody. The parliamentary elections was a sweep for pro-government
Gotcha.
forces.
Hold on, just 1 second. Just 1 second. I
Yeah,
need to
problem.
retrieve something.
I have control now, everybody.
Yep. There we go. Hyena wanted a phone charger I had right behind me.
No problem, no problem.
Okay. All right. I'm back. Thank you. Sorry.
The only people waiting are the entire population of Belarus, you know. They
Yeah,
get a phone
yeah,
call
yeah,
from
yeah,
Gordon.
okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah, do you think that, so you're concerned essentially that even if the goals of the protesters are met and Lukashenko is deposed, that we're going to get either a Putin puppet or somebody who's just a slightly more popular strongman?
It's hard to say. I mean, they could restore the 1994 Constitution. Now, that's something that's been called for. That's before the 1995 referendum and the 1996 referendum, which hardly concentrated power within the hands of Lukashenko. And that was actually the last election, which I would call a legitimate election in Belarus.
Mhm.
So I would say that could be something that they could aim for, and it's something that a few of their leaders have called for. I would say that they are united in their disdain for Lukashenko and do want him gone. Whether it comes to how he would be removed, I guess just constant pressure forcing him into a position where he basically has to step down is one option. But another option is the idea that Vladimir Putin puts pressure on him after enough time to say, okay, this isn't working. You step down, we'll replace you. But Lukashenko is also has extremely loyal police force and extremely loyal services. So it's hard to say, but I really, there hasn't been yet a like clear united, like, okay, you step down, then this happens, then this happens, and this happens. It's because it's still only been 4 weeks. So even though that seems like a while, it really isn't when you consider that their leadership, he's also been arresting and detaining. So it's kind of hard to make a plan when you're being tortured.
Yeah, I would say so. So you're not optimistic then?
I would say that this is the biggest breath of democracy Belarus has felt since, well, 1996, or 1994.
Gotcha.
So it is hopeful, and there is support for it. But I also think that the European Union is playing this kind of long game to an extent, where they know that there's a chance, a pretty sizable chance, that the protest movement does not succeed, and then they'll still be dealing with Lukashenko. And the fact that Vladimir Putin's backing up here, they want to have somewhat decent relationship where they could work with him after and not push him into the arms of Putin. So I think the geopolitics is getting in the way of this. The thing that could assuage my concern there is
Mhm.
if tomorrow they announced we are placing sanctions upon Lukashenko himself. If that was to happen, then I feel like they'd be going all in. They are going further than I thought they would, which has been nice. I just hope that they continue to. But I will also say that the Belarusian people have seemed to, after 26 years of terror, seem to be standing up, and they've stood up for 4 weeks, which is something that is, extremely beautiful and something I didn't really expect. So, you know,
Yeah.
don't.
No, oh,
I
no,
think
yeah,
I
yeah.
think they have a
I'm not
chance.
saying we should just be doomers who's like, hey, wow, something
Yeah,
cool.
yeah. I'm
happens.
saying that this is the best chance they've ever had. I'll certainly say that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I know, I recognize that. Yeah, revolutions or attempts at revolutions are very rarely following a decent and well-maintained set of rails. So hopefully it goes in a decent direction. I have to admit, from what you said, I'm a little concerned about the future of that country. Do you think there is a chance of those sanctions being placed? Do you think that eventually they might turn the tide in that respect?
They might, but it would take some pretty bold action. I think there's a possibility if Lukashenko. I think the best odds of that happening is if Lukashenko overplays his hand. He says, "Okay, this has gone on long enough. I'm sending in troops, and then a ton of protesters die. Then I could see then something happening. Or possibly if they go on to for a certain amount of time and make enough progress or grow to enough size that the European Union is like, okay, I think the tide has turned in their favor. I think to get good relations with this government and try to 180 European Belarus's ties to the West, we should back the protest movement. I think those were probably two likely scenarios that would prompt them to go all in.
Yeah. Okay, that's fair. Damn. I wish I had some insightful commentary on any of this, but honestly now I'm just kind of worried for the protesters there. Especially with regards to that comment on the security forces, strong, even if sanctions were placed, even if everything ended up going as good as it possibly could, strongmen aren't typically, that keen on just peacefully abdicating. They tend to take a part of the country out with them. So hopefully things don't come to that. Do you see a possible Belarus admission into the the European Union sometime in the next 30 or 40
the
years?
51st state of the United States.
Hey, look, it's not the
That'd be based.
maybe.
Hey,
It's nothing
just
wrong
make
with
it a
that.
giant NATO base.
I'm thinking we should just make England the 51st state. Honestly, I think we should go right around back. Why not? They're fucking up their own country as hard as we're fucking up ours. We're clearly bedfellows.
Maybe Scotland if they ever got independence. That's the only one I'd want.
I don't think Scotland would want to be associated with us. Isn't Scotland based? Every time I hear people talk about Scotland, it's in the context of them hating the reactionary Englanders.
Wait. Trump gave them golf courses. Okay, they love us. We gave them aid.
Oh, while I have you here, what do you think? What are your odds on the election?
My odds on the election? Oh, I think I think Biden is going to win. But I mean, I don't say that with immense confidence. The fact that I don't is not good. I hope he wins. I hope everybody not only supports him, but will actually phone bank for him, considering we've seen what Trump is doing when his back is against the wall. And let's not forget what I still find to be the most immoral thing he's done in his presidency, his backstabbing of the Kurds, which led to the execution of Kurdish politicians, the kidnapping of young girls by Turkish-backed militias, the huge displacement of populations, bombing of hospitals, and deadly campaigns against the Kurdish population locally. And it was something that was done with zero strategic gain and nothing more to please Erdogan. And it seemed, and I've read John Bolton's book. I never thought I'd say that sentence out loud. And from what I've read in there, it seemed that Erdogan was able to confuse him by using complex, just abbreviations one after the other. And he basically used them enough to make Trump think they're all the same thing to justify it.
That's good. Yeah, that about tracks.
Oh, and there's another thing.
It all
This is kind of
fits.
interesting. Trump also approved of the Chinese concentration camps for Uyghur Muslims during the early stages of the operation.
I've mentioned that, but people are saying like, Lamau, you're taking John Bolton at his word. How much do you think we can trust the contents of that book? I know right now Legal Eagle has filed a lawsuit to have the Trump administration defend their censorship of certain portions of it. I doubt the Trump administration would feel a need to censor portions of the book if they weren't, if they were completely untrue. But I don't know how that speaks to the portions that were uncensored.
My thing is when it talks, I think Trump has openly said that during trade negotiations that he didn't want to talk about the Uyghur Muslim issue because it could hurt the trade negotiations. This is something that has happened late in his term. This is kind of concern about it. And it's not because he has a deep love of the Uyghur population. He wanted a Muslim ban. So is it really that surprising that maybe a year or two after he said ban all Muslims from the United States, when China was saying we're doing this to fight terrorism, he looked at it and says, that's okay.
Yeah, it certainly doesn't surprise me. I was just curious for your thoughts on it. Yeah, no. It sounds like he's really tough on China. It's funny because for reasons that have nothing to do with Trump or his rhetoric, I do think it's important for America to posture pretty hard with China. But I feel like Trump has done absolutely nothing but like concede to to the Chinese government in so many strategic ways.
It's weird because my thing is like the biggest successes of Trump's China policy. I would say the biggest success that was him was like his Taiwan policy, his arms deals with Taiwan, just generally being pretty decent towards Taiwan. That's cool.
Mhm.
I hope that's something that continues. But when it comes to freedom of navigation operations, that was started during the Obama administration. That's something that actually the Obama Biden administration started.
Mhm.
So I'd actually be quite happy with them continuing those operations. When it comes to his Hong Kong policy, I mean, he just kind of carried out what was already automatically set to happen when it came to the removal of special trading status. I mean, he might have made some noise about it, but as we have seen, when it comes to the Uyghur Muslim population, was quite comfortable approving of it early on and not talking about it during trade talks, putting a price tag on each individual in those camps.
All right, true and fair. Just wanted your perspective on that. We're coming up near the hour mark. Any longer than that, and people probably won't watch. Do you have any final points that you'd like to make on Belarus specifically?
When it comes to Belarus, it's a country that doesn't get a lot of international attention. It's in the middle of Europe. It's landlocked. It's between what many consider the East and the West. It's between, even if it does a lot of geopolitical positioning, it doesn't have an extremely burgeoning tourist industry. It's actually quite hard to get access to Belarus for many people. So it doesn't get a lot of attention. And I think that has, to some extent, allowed many people to recently learn about Alexander Lukashenko. But Alexander Lukashenko has also always been referred as the last dictator of Europe. I don't know if that classification is necessarily fair when it comes to Viktor Orban and others, but he is certainly extremely brutal. He is somebody who claims to be this person holding up the Soviet legacy of equality or whatever you want to call it,
Right.
while also throwing out any concerns about a sickness that could kill his people and said the cure was work harder or play ice hockey, um, drink vodka and sauna. He is somebody who tortures detainees, detains protesters, beats protesters, carries around an AK-47 when he's challenged, walks away in anger when somebody shows him just light opposition in a crowd, flies helicopters over Independence Square, deploys tanks to defend Independence Square. Somebody who is just generally a gross human being who should have never been near power, who has centralized power early in his term and has now ruled for 26 years. And that many of the people on the street know nothing else than Alexander Lukashenko, which makes sense why it's not wrong for them to hope for something better than what they've experienced so far in their life, which is an authoritarian strongman with a silly mustache.
Okay. Fair.
Yeah.
I have two questions. First of all, just in case I have to talk about this in the future, there's no element of Belarus that even approaches the qualifications for socialism, correct? The economy is not decommodified and is not owned by the working population?
I actually don't. I can be honest. I don't know a lot about the Belarusian economy. I mostly
Okay.
know about its geopolitics, but I can say that he did do his best to preserve the Soviet legacy. He was actually one of the hardcore extremists. The coup against Gorbachev during the end of the Soviet Union.
Yes.
He was the only Belarusian politician to support it.
Huh.
Yeah, interesting.
Wait, that actually is really interesting.
Yeah.
Belarusian economy. World's 72nd largest. I'll look into their economy. I'd be
Yeah.
interested in that. Not, mind you, that the Soviet Union approached what I would call socialism.
Yes.
But, right.
And I will say that
Oh, yes?
they did avoid something called economic shock therapy, which is probably the thing people point to the most when they're
The
trying
former
to give
Soviet states.
Lukashenko any credit on his economic policy.
Gotcha. So he avoided the collapse of many of the Soviet satellite nations after they were no longer being propped up by the Soviet Union.
Basically, in the collapse of the general economy completely. It was a lot of it was due to subsidized oil and other things.
I mean,
but
whatever
he did.
works.
Yeah.
Yeah. Privatization. State ownership restructuring began the first 40 enterprises. Let's see. In January 1993, the law which should have become the basis for wide privatization in Belarus. Lukashenko outlined his plans for privatization of enterprises. Yeah, okay, sure, fair. Has anyone attempted to challenge him to the presidency over a game of hockey?
No, but that would be extremely interesting. And I would make a great ending. I want like a Rocky type hockey game with Lukashenko, right? It's like when the opposition person wins, it like changed Belarus forever. That'd be great.
Yeah, okay, fantastic.
Wonderful.
Please shout yourself out.
Hello, my name is Dylan Burns. I am the foreign policy advisor for Michaela Wilkes and Senator Jill Carter. That's state senator, but I say senator because it sounds cooler. I also worked on the Mike Gravel presidential campaign as the Maryland state director and deputy regional director. I'm doing my own work recently with a bunch of different organizations, too many to mention. I'm looking at doing some organizing with, they want me to help basically organize with our revolution locally in a little bit. I'm going to be doing some stuff with that. I'm also making it easier for young candidates to vote with the city charter amendment, which has, after last week's meeting, has exactly zero opposition and is looking to completely go through easily, which is the thing that actually stopped me from running for office when 1 year ago.
Fuck
So
that. You should be
I'm
running.
doing. Thank you very much. You can find me when I stream, where I cover foreign policy content and host debate with right wingers mostly, of a long catalog of right wingers. I know you're all lefties out there, but if you ever have an interest in watching lefties and righties go head to head, you can go head over to Dylan Burns TV on Twitch, which is DYLANBURNS TV, and on Twitter it's Dylan Burns 1776, which is DYLANBURNS 177.
Or you can type !Dylan in chat, and it'll
That is
pop right up for
true.
you. There you go.
Wow, amazing.
Yeah, I have a lot of respect for this guy. Please do check out his content. Thank you very much for coming on. I really do appreciate it. I hope to speak with you again soon. We still have to talk about the Afghanistan papers. I know it's a little bit
Yeah,
late, but I want people to know.
What was that? Like 4 months ago, you asked me to come on for that?
I'm sorry. If you've checked Twitter lately, I'm sure you can understand that I've been quite busy with everything.
Yeah, I saw there was something about that. I'll just say that I disavow you
Mhm.
and
There we go.
everything you stand for, especially your ponytail.
There we go. There we go. Keep safe. You'll be a
Wonderful.
good politician.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye. I like Dylan.